They laughed when Eleanor Caldwell climbed onto that horse. A woman her size, they said, wouldn't make it 5 miles into the mountains, let alone survive the blizzard bearing down on Copper Falls. But while the town placed bets on her frozen corpse, Eleanor rode straight into hell itself. What she found in that cabin would shatter everything they believed about strength, about survival, about her. This is the story of a nurse nobody trusted and a dying man nobody wanted to save, and the choice that changed both their lives forever. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and let's begin. The general store smelled like tobacco, wet wool, and judgment. Eleanor Caldwell stood at the counter, waiting for old Harris to acknowledge her existence, which he seemed in no particular hurry to do. He was restocking shelves with the kind of deliberate slowness that said, "I see you there, and I'm making you wait on purpose." She didn't fidget, didn't clear her throat, just stood there with her medical bag at her feet and her supply list in her hand because she'd learned years ago that reacting only made it worse. "Help you?" Harris finally grunted, not turning around. "The usual order. Bandages, carbolic acid, laudanum if you've got it. Quinine, thread for sutures." "Might be out of thread." "You're not out of thread, Mr. Harris. I can see 3 spools from here." He turned then, giving her the look, the one she got from almost everyone in Copper Falls. The one that said, "What's a woman like you doing taking up space in a place like this?" $2 extra, he said. "Supply shortages." There were no supply shortages. The stagecoach had come through yesterday right on schedule. Eleanor counted out the coins anyway, overpaying by $2 she didn't have to spare, because picking fights with the only general store owner in 100 miles was a luxury she couldn't afford. The bell above the door jangled, cold air rushed in, and with it came the Trotter brothers, Samuel and Ben, both miners, both drunk at 11 in the morning, both looking for entertainment. "Well, hell," Samuel said, loud enough to make sure everyone in the store heard him. "Didn't know they were letting livestock shop here now." Ben snickered. A woman by the fabric bolts, Mrs. Hendricks, who Eleanor had treated for pneumonia just last month, didn't quite hide her smile. Eleanor kept her eyes on Harris. "The supplies, please." "Hey now, don't be rude," Samuel said, swaggering closer. "I'm talking to you. Least you could do is acknowledge a man's greeting." "I'm working," Eleanor said quietly. "If you need medical attention, you can come by the clinic." "Medical attention," Ben repeated, like it was the funniest thing he'd heard all week. "From you? I'd rather let my leg rot off than have you touching me." "That can be arranged," Eleanor said. Samuel's face darkened. He wasn't used to backtalk, especially not from women, and especially not from someone who looked like her. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "You got a smart mouth for someone who—" "Samuel," Harris's voice cut across the store. "Take it outside. This is a place of business." Not a defense of her, just a defense of his merchandise and his floor space. Samuel spat on the floorboards near her feet, not quite hitting her skirt but close enough to make his point, and shouldered past her toward the door. Ben followed, but not before making a loud oinking sound that got another round of laughter from Mrs. Hendricks. The door slammed. Eleanor's hands were shaking, so she kept them flat on the counter where nobody could see. Harris shoved her supplies across the wood. "Anything else?" "No, sir." "Then we're done here." She gathered her things, overstuffed medical bag cutting into her shoulder as she headed for the door. Behind her, Mrs. Hendricks stage whispered to Harris, "Don't know why Doc Pruitt hired her in the first place. Ain't natural woman that size trying to do a man's work." Eleanor pushed out into the street. Copper Falls wasn't much of a town. 24 buildings hunched against the base of the Bitterroot Mountains like they were trying to hide from the sky. Main Street was a rutted track of frozen mud. The general store, the saloon, the assayer's office, the livery, and the jail clustered on one side. The clinic, the church, and a handful of residential cabins scattered on the other. Everything built quick and cheap because mining towns didn't plan for permanence. The wind came down off the peaks like a knife. Eleanor pulled her coat tighter, a man's coat because they didn't make women's coats built for bodies like hers, and started toward the clinic. She'd made it maybe 20 yards when she heard the commotion. A horse, ridden hard, coming up the main road at a speed that was dangerous on the ice. The rider was bent low over the animal's neck, and even from a distance Eleanor could see the desperation in the way he rode. The horse skidded to a stop outside the saloon. The rider half fell out of the saddle, grabbing at the hitching post to keep from going down. It was Jacob Yates, one of the trappers who worked the high country. His face was raw from windburn, his beard crusted with ice, and his eyes had the wild look of a man who'd seen something that broke him a little. "I need help," he was shouting, voice cracking. "Someone, anyone, I need help!" Men spilled out of the saloon, not because they cared, but because drama was currency in a town this small. Sheriff Wilkes came out of his office, thumbs hooked in his belt, moving with the slow authority of a man who knew everyone would wait on his word. Eleanor shifted her medical bag and started toward them. "What's all this noise about?" Wilkes demanded. Yates was shaking. "It's Jasper Kane. He's dying. Up in his cabin. Something attacked him, tore him up bad. He's losing blood, and I can't. Jasper Kane?" One of the saloon men laughed. "That crazy bastard's still alive?" "Barely," Yates said. "He needs a doctor. Needs one now." "Doc Pruitt's 3 days gone to Silver Ridge," Wilkes said. "Won't be back till next week." "Then someone else. Anyone who knows medicine." The crowd shifted, uncomfortable. A few eyes flicked toward Eleanor, then quickly away. "Ain't nobody going up that mountain in this weather," Wilkes said. "Storm's coming in. You can see it yourself." He wasn't wrong. The sky to the north was the color of old iron, heavy and low, and the wind had that hollow sound that meant snow was coming, serious snow, the kind that buried trails and killed travelers. "He'll die," Yates said, and the pleading in his voice was raw enough to make Eleanor's chest tight. "Please, someone." "Should have thought of that before he decided to live like a hermit," someone muttered. "Jasper Kane made his choices," Wilkes said. "Ain't nobody's responsibility to save a man from his own foolishness." "I'll go." The words came out of Eleanor's mouth before she'd fully decided to say them. Every head turned. Wilkes stared at her like she'd just spoken in tongues. "What'd you say?" "I said I'll go." Eleanor stepped forward into the center of the crowd. "I'm a nurse. If he's injured, I can help." Silence. Then someone started laughing. "You?" It was Samuel Trotter, still drunk, still looking for entertainment. "You're going to ride up into the high country in a blizzard? I've ridden in snow before." "Lady, that ain't snow." This from one of the miners. "That's a killer storm. You'll be frozen solid before you make it halfway." "I have cold weather gear." "You won't fit on a horse," someone else said, and the laughter spread like a brush fire. Eleanor's face burned, but she kept her voice level. "Mr. Yates, how far is the cabin?" Yates looked at her like she was something he couldn't quite bring into focus. 8 miles. Maybe 9. Straight up the North Trail past Widow's Creek, into the high timber. "How long has he been injured?" "I left him this morning. He was—" Yates's voice broke. He was barely conscious, fever already setting in. Infection, Eleanor thought. Lacerations, probably deep. Blood loss. Sepsis was the real killer with wounds like that, bacteria in the blood, spreading like wildfire. If he was already feverish, he had hours at most. "I need a horse," she said to Wilkes. "A strong one." The sheriff just stared at her. "You're serious?" "Do I look like I'm joking?" "You look like you're about to get yourself killed." Wilkes shook his head. "I ain't authorizing this. Town can't be responsible for your poor judgment. I'm not asking for authorization, I'm asking for a horse. And I'm telling you no. You ride out in this, you die. Simple as that." And then I got to explain to Doc Pruitt why I let his nurse freeze to death on some fool's errand. Eleanor turned to the crowd. "Anyone, I'll pay you back. I just need—" "Save your breath, honey," Mrs. Hendricks called from the boardwalk. "No one's giving you a horse so you can kill it along with yourself." "Jasper Kane's a mean drunk and a recluse," another voice added. "Probably deserves whatever he got." "He's a human being," Eleanor said, voice rising despite herself. "And he's dying. So let him die," Wilkes said flatly. "World's got enough trouble without adding yours to it." The crowd murmured agreement. A few people were already drifting away, back to their warm fires and their easy consciences. Eleanor stood there, medical bag weighing down her shoulder, surrounded by people who wouldn't spit on her if she was on fire, and felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. Not despair. Anger. She turned to Yates. "Where's your horse?" His eyes went wide. "Miss, you can't—" "Where?" "Tied out front of the saloon, but she's half dead from the ride down. She won't make it back up." Eleanor walked to the saloon, the crowd parting like she carried disease. The horse was a scrappy roan mare, sides heaving, foam at the bit. Exhausted, yes, but not finished. Eleanor ran a hand down her neck. The mare's ears flicked back, uncertain. "I know," Eleanor murmured. "I know you're tired, but I need you to do this." "Miss Caldwell!" Yates was behind her now, voice desperate. "Please, don't do this. They're right. You won't make it. And I can't. I can't have your death on my conscience, too." Eleanor looked at him, really looked, saw the guilt eating him alive, the way his hands shook, the way he couldn't meet her eyes. "You left him," she said quietly. "You came down for help, and you left him up there alone." "I had to," Yates whispered. "I couldn't save him by myself. You thought someone would care enough to help." Eleanor tightened the mare's girth strap. "You were wrong." She swung herself up into the saddle. It wasn't graceful, nothing about her was, and she'd long since stopped pretending otherwise. But she managed it. The mare shifted under her weight but held steady. "Miss Caldwell, Eleanor," she looked down at Wilkes, at the crowd, at every face that had mocked her and dismissed her and treated her like she was less than human. "When I come back," she said, voice carrying across the frozen street, "I want every one of you to remember this moment. Remember that you stood here and did nothing. Remember that you valued a man's life at exactly 0. And remember that I was the only one who gave a damn." She dug her heels in. The mare lurched forward into a trot, then a canter. Behind her, someone shouted something, probably another insult, probably another joke, but the wind took the words away. Eleanor rode north, toward the mountains, toward the storm, toward a man she'd never met, and a death she was probably riding to meet. But at least she'd die doing something that mattered. At least she'd die trying. The trail started easy. For the first mile, it was just the main road leading out of Copper Falls, wide enough for wagons, worn smooth by years of traffic. The mare settled into a steady pace, her earlier exhaustion giving way to the kind of stubborn endurance that good mountain horses were bred for. Eleanor kept her eyes on the sky. The storm front was moving faster than she'd hoped. Already the clouds had swallowed the highest peaks, and the wind carried the sharp electric smell that came before heavy snow. She had maybe 3 hours before it hit. Maybe less. The road narrowed, became a trail. Then the trail became a suggestion, barely visible under a dusting of old snow. Eleanor had to trust the mare's instinct, let the horse pick her way through the rocks and deadfall. They climbed. The temperature dropped degree by degree. Eleanor's breath came out in white plumes. Her hands, even in gloves, started to go numb. She flexed her fingers, keeping the blood moving because numb hands were useless hands, and she'd need every bit of dexterity she had when she reached Jasper Kane, if she reached him. The doubt crept in like the cold, slow, insidious. What the hell was she doing? She wasn't a hero. She was a fat woman on a tired horse, riding into a blizzard to save a man who was probably already dead. The town was right. This was stupid. This was suicide. But the alternative was going back. Going back to that store, that street, those faces. Going back to being the joke, the disappointment, the thing people tolerated because Doc Pruitt needed someone to change bedpans and boil instruments. Going back to being invisible except when they wanted to mock her. No, she'd rather freeze. The trail switchbacked up the mountainside, steep enough that Eleanor had to lean forward in the saddle to keep her balance. The mare's hooves slipped on ice, caught, slipped again. Each step was a gamble, and the drop-off to the left was steep enough to kill them both if the horse went down. "Come on, girl," Eleanor murmured. "Just a little further." The mare snorted, breath fogging the air, but kept climbing. They reached a plateau, a brief flat stretch where a creek cut through the rocks. "Widow's Creek," Yates had said. Past that, into the high timber. Eleanor let the mare drink, though the water was so cold it steamed where it touched the animal's muzzle. While the horse drank, Eleanor checked her supplies. Medical bag, bandages, carbolic acid, laudanum, needle, and thread, forceps, a scalpel, strips of clean cloth. Not enough. Never enough. But it was what she had. Personal gear, a wool blanket, a canteen, some hardtack and jerky, matches and a waterproof tin. Also not enough. But also all she had. No tent, no sleeping roll, no backup plan. This was a one-way trip unless she could stabilize Jasper Kane fast enough to get them both back down before the storm closed the mountain. The mare lifted her head, water dripping from her muzzle. Her ears swiveled forward, alert. Eleanor heard it too. A low sound carried on the wind. Not quite a howl, not quite a growl. Wolves. The mare sidestepped, nervous. Eleanor tightened her grip on the reins, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved. But that didn't mean nothing was there. Wolves hunted in packs. And if they'd already tasted blood, if they'd been the ones to attack Jasper Kane, they'd be hungry. Bolder. Easy, Eleanor said, as much to herself as to the horse. We keep moving. They pushed into the timber. The trees closed in, dense pine and spruce, branches heavy with snow, blocking out what little light remained. The trail disappeared completely. Eleanor had to navigate by instinct and hope, guiding the mare through the gaps, ducking under low branches that scraped her coat and pulled at her hair. The wind picked up. The first flakes started to fall. Not the gentle drifting snow of a winter postcard. Hard pellets of ice that stung exposed skin and turned the world into a shifting wall of white. Eleanor pulled her scarf up over her nose and mouth. Visibility dropped to maybe 10 feet, then 5. The mare balked. No, Eleanor said sharply. No stopping. Move. But the horse planted her feet, ears flat against her skull, eyes rolling white. That's when Eleanor smelled it. Blood. A lot of it. She slid out of the saddle, legs nearly buckling when her boots hit the ground. Her thighs were screaming from hours in the saddle, muscles she didn't use often enough protesting every movement. But she forced herself forward, leading the mare by the reins, following the smell. 20 yards into the trees, she found the source. Deer, or what was left of one. The carcass had been torn apart, ribs cracked open, organs scattered, snow around it stained dark red. Whatever had done this hadn't been interested in a clean kill. This was fury, this was rage. The mare whinnied, high and panicked, trying to bolt. Eleanor held tight to the reins, muscles straining. Stop! Stop it! The horse reared. Eleanor lost her grip. The reins slipped through her gloves and the mare wheeled, crashing back through the underbrush, disappearing into the storm. Gone. Eleanor stood there, alone in the trees, surrounded by the torn remains of something that had died screaming, with no horse and no way back down the mountain. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she picked up her medical bag, slung it over her shoulder, and started walking. Because what the hell else was she going to do? She found the cabin by sheer luck. Or maybe not luck. Maybe desperation had its own navigation system, some primal part of the brain that kicked in when death was the only alternative. The structure appeared out of the white like a ghost. Rough-hewn logs, a stone chimney leaking thin smoke, shutters closed tight against the wind. Small, isolated. The kind of place a man came to when he was done with the world. Eleanor staggered to the door, so cold now she couldn't feel her feet, couldn't feel her face. Her hands were clumsy, numb, barely able to grip the handle. Locked. Of course it was locked. She pounded on the wood. Jasper Kane, it's Eleanor Caldwell. I'm a nurse. Open the door. Nothing. She pounded again, harder, until her fist went numb. Mr. Kane! Still nothing. Panic clawed up her throat. She hadn't come this far, hadn't ridden through a blizzard and lost her horse and risked her life, to freeze to death on a stranger's doorstep. Eleanor stepped back, looked around. There. A window, shutters hanging crooked on their hinges. She grabbed a rock from the ground, heavy enough to do damage, and smashed it through the glass. The sound was sharp, violent. Glass scattered across the floor inside. Eleanor cleared the remaining shards with her sleeve, hoisted herself up, not easy, not graceful, her body protesting every movement, and squeezed through the window frame. She fell more than climbed, landing hard on the cabin floor, medical bag slamming into her ribs. For a second, she just lay there, gasping, every part of her body screaming. Then she smelled it again. Blood, fresh this time. And something else underneath it, the sweet, rotten stink of infection. Eleanor forced herself up. The cabin was one room, small and dark. A fireplace with embers still glowing. A table, a chair, shelves with supplies. And in the corner, on a narrow cot, a man. He was on his back, one arm thrown over his eyes, chest rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths. Even in the dim light, Eleanor could see the blood, soaked through the blankets, pooled on the floor beneath the cot. Too much blood for any man to lose and still be breathing. She crossed the room in 3 strides, dropped to her knees beside him. "Jasper Kane?" No response. She pulled the blanket back and her breath caught. His chest and shoulder were shredded, deep parallel gashes that looked like they'd been made by claws the size of knives. The wounds were ragged, edges torn, muscle visible beneath. One cut had sliced clean through to the ribs, and the infection had already started. The flesh around the wounds was swollen, angry red, streaks of darkness spreading out from the lacerations like veins of poison. Eleanor pressed 2 fingers to his throat. His pulse was there, but weak, thready. His skin was burning up. "Okay," she said aloud, to herself, to him, to anyone who might be listening. "Okay, you're still alive. That means I can work with this." She stood, looked around the cabin with a critical eye. She needed water, clean cloth, heat. The fire first. She threw fresh wood on the embers, blew on them until flames caught, built it up until the room started to warm. Then she found a bucket, half-frozen water inside, and set it near the fire to melt and heat. While the water warmed, Eleanor opened her medical bag and laid out her tools with shaking hands. Scalpel, forceps, needle and thread, carbolic acid, laudanum. Not enough. None of this was enough for wounds this severe, but it was what she had. She rolled up her sleeves. "Mr. Kane," she said, loud and clear, "I'm going to clean your wounds. It's going to hurt. If you can hear me, I need you to stay still." His eyes moved under his closed lids, but didn't open. Eleanor soaked a cloth in the heated water, wrung it out, and began to clean the blood away from the wounds. The first touch made him convulse. His eyes snapped open, wild, unfocused, the whites showing all around. He tried to sit up, tried to fight. "Stop, stop." Eleanor pressed a hand to his chest, firm but not rough. "You're safe. I'm helping you. Stop moving." He didn't seem to hear her. His hand shot out, fingers closing around her wrist with surprising strength for a man half dead. And for a second, Eleanor thought he might hurt her. But then his eyes found hers, and something in them shifted. Recognition, maybe. Or just the relief of seeing another human face. His grip loosened. His head fell back against the cot. "That's it," Eleanor said softly. "Stay with me." She worked methodically, piece by piece, cleaned the blood, flushed the wounds with carbolic acid. He screamed at that, a sound that made her teeth ache, but she didn't stop. Screaming meant he was still alive. Silence was what she feared. The lacerations were deep, too deep. She could see bone in places. Eleanor threaded her needle, hands steady now, despite the fear. She'd done this before. Stitched up miners with crushed fingers, trappers with knife wounds, women torn open by difficult births. She knew how to make a body hold together when it wanted to fall apart. But never wounds like this, never this much damage. She started at the shoulder where the bleeding was worst. Small, tight stitches, pulling the torn edges of muscle back together, trying to close the gap enough to stop the hemorrhaging. Jasper made sounds, low, animal sounds of pain, but he didn't fight her, didn't move except to shudder when the needle went in. "You're doing good," Eleanor murmured, not sure if she was talking to him or herself. "You're doing real good, just hold on." 1 stitch, 2, 5, 10. Her fingers cramped. Her back ached. The heat from the fire made sweat run down her face, stinging her eyes. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because if she stopped, he'd die. And she hadn't come this far to watch him die. Hours passed. The storm outside howled, shaking the cabin walls, rattling the shutters. Snow piled up against the door. Eleanor worked. Stitch by stitch, wound by wound, she pulled him back from the edge. Finally, the bleeding slowed. The worst of the lacerations were closed. Not perfectly, not beautifully, but closed enough. Eleanor sat back on her heels, every muscle in her body trembling with exhaustion. Jasper's breathing had evened out. His eyes were closed again, but the wildness was gone from his face. He looked almost peaceful. Almost. Eleanor touched his forehead, still burning up. The infection was the real fight now. She'd bought him time, but if the fever didn't break, all her work would be for nothing. She dug through her bag, found the laudanum, Not much left, maybe 2 doses. She measured out half, lifted his head, and tipped the liquid between his lips. He swallowed reflexively. Some of it ran down his chin, but enough went down his throat. "That'll help with the pain," Eleanor said, even though he probably couldn't hear her. "Rest now. Let your body fight." She pulled the blanket up over him, tucked it in around his shoulders. Then, because there was nothing else to do, Eleanor stood and looked around the cabin properly for the first time. It was sparse, almost monastic. No decorations, no personal effects, just the bare minimum for survival. Cot, table, chair, shelves with canned goods and ammunition, a rifle mounted over the door. On the table, a half-finished carving, some kind of animal, a bear maybe. On the shelf, a single photograph in a tin frame. A woman and a child, faded and old. Eleanor didn't touch it, felt like it would be an intrusion. Instead, she found more wood, fed the fire, filled the bucket with clean snow to melt for drinking water. Made coffee over the flames because she needed something to do with her hands, something to keep from thinking about how trapped they were, how the storm outside was still raging, how she had no horse and no way down, and no guarantee this man would even survive the night. She poured the coffee into a tin cup, wrapped her hands around it for warmth, and sat on the floor with her back against the wall. Outside, the wind screamed. Inside, Jasper Kane breathed. And Eleanor Caldwell, who'd been told her whole life that she wasn't good enough, wasn't strong enough, wasn't woman enough, closed her eyes and let herself believe, just for a moment, that maybe she'd done something that mattered. Maybe this time she'd been enough. Eleanor woke to the sound of breaking glass. She jerked upright, coffee cup clattering from her lap, heart hammering. For a disoriented second, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The cabin, the storm, Jasper Kane bleeding out on the cot. The breaking sound came again, not glass, ice. The shutters rattling so hard against the window frame that frost was cracking off in sheets. Eleanor pushed herself up, every joint stiff and aching. She'd fallen asleep sitting against the wall, and now her neck felt like someone had taken a hammer to it. The fire had burned down to coals again. The cabin was freezing. She checked Jasper first. He was still unconscious, but his breathing had changed, faster now, shallower. His face was flushed dark red, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. Eleanor pressed her hand to his skin and swore under her breath. The fever had spiked. She'd seen this before. The body's immune system going into overdrive, trying to fight off infection, burning itself up in the process. If it went too high for too long, it would cook his brain. He'd seize, fall into a coma, die. She needed to bring the temperature down. Eleanor stumbled to the door, braced herself, and shoved it open against the weight of snow piled on the other side. Wind slammed into her like a fist, stealing her breath. The world outside was nothing but white. No sky, no ground, just an endless wall of snow falling so thick she couldn't see 5 feet. She scooped up handfuls of snow, packed them into the bucket, and fought the door closed again. Her hands were already numb by the time she got back to the fire. She set the bucket near the flames to melt just enough to be liquid, then soaked strips of cloth in the ice water. "This is going to be cold," she said to Jasper, even though he couldn't hear her. "But we don't have a choice." She pulled the blanket down and laid the cold compresses across his chest, his forehead, the back of his neck. He flinched at the first touch, a full-body shudder, but didn't wake. Eleanor wrung out another cloth, replaced it, then another, methodical, rhythmic. The only thing that mattered was keeping the fever from climbing higher. An hour passed, maybe 2. Time felt strange in the cabin, stretched thin and warped by exhaustion and fear. The fever didn't break. Eleanor checked the wounds. The stitches were holding, but the skin around them was hot to the touch, the infection spreading despite the carbolic acid. Red streaks were crawling up toward his shoulder, toward his heart. Sepsis, blood poisoning. If it reached his heart, he was finished. She had laudanum left, enough for 1 more dose, but that would only mask the pain. It wouldn't stop the infection. What she needed was something to kill the bacteria at the source. But she didn't have antibiotics. Nobody did. Not out here, not in 1893. Eleanor sat back on her heels, mind racing through every scrap of medical knowledge she'd picked up over the years. Doc Pruitt's lessons, her own reading, folk remedies from the miners' wives. There was something about honey. One of the old women in town, Mrs. Chen, Had told her once about using honey on infected wounds, said it drew out the poison, kept the bad humors from spreading. Eleanor had dismissed it at the time as superstition, but she'd also seen Mrs. Chen treat a miner's crushed hand that should have killed him, and watched him walk away 2 weeks later with all his fingers intact. Eleanor turned to the cabin's shelves, started pulling things down. Canned beans, salted pork, coffee, ammunition, a jar of something dark and sticky. Honey. She unscrewed the lid, sniffed it, old probably, crystallized at the bottom. But honey didn't spoil, that was the whole point. Eleanor heated water, dissolved some of the honey into it until it was liquid again, then used clean cloth to pack it directly into the deepest wounds. Jasper's eyes shot open. He gasped, back arching off the cot, and this time when his hand grabbed her wrist, it was hard enough to hurt. Stop. His voice was raw, barely human. Stop. I know it hurts, Eleanor said, trying to keep her voice steady even though her heart was racing. I know, but I have to do this or you're going to die. Let me. He was trying to sit up, trying to fight her, delirious with fever. Let me die. Absolutely not. Eleanor put her weight into holding him down, one hand flat on his chest. You don't get to die. Not after I rode through hell to get here. His eyes found hers. They were gray, she noticed. Pale gray like winter sky, and completely unfocused. Who? He blinked, trying to make sense of her. Who are you? Eleanor Caldwell. I'm a nurse. Jacob Yates came down the mountain and said you needed help. Jacob. Something flickered across his face. Confusion. Guilt. He shouldn't have. Well, he did. And I'm here. So you're going to lie still and let me finish treating these wounds, and then you're going to sleep, and then you're going to get better. Understand? Jasper stared at her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. You're bossy, he rasped. You're difficult, Eleanor shot back. Now lie down. He did. Not because he wanted to, but because his body gave out, collapsing back against the cot like a puppet with cut strings. Eleanor finished packing the wounds with honey-soaked cloth, then bandaged them properly. Her hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from relief. He'd woken up. That was good. Delirious, yes, but conscious. That meant his brain wasn't cooking yet. She pulled the blanket back over him, tucked it in tight. Sleep, she said quietly. His eyes had already closed. Eleanor sagged against the wall, every muscle trembling. She was so tired she could barely think straight. But she couldn't sleep. Not yet. She had to keep monitoring him, keep changing the compresses, keep watching for signs that the fever was breaking or that the infection was winning. Outside, the storm howled on. Hours bled together. Eleanor lost track of time completely. Day or night, it didn't matter. The cabin was a tiny island of firelight in an ocean of white, and all that existed was the rhythm of her work. Check the wounds, change the compresses, feed the fire, melt more snow, check the wounds again. At some point she ate, forcing down hardtack that tasted like cardboard because her body needed fuel. At some point she dozed off again, head resting on her knees, and woke with a start when the fire popped loud enough to sound like a gunshot. Jasper was mumbling in his sleep, fragments of words, none of them making sense. Eleanor pressed her hand to his forehead, still hot, but not as hot as before. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The fever was starting to break. She changed the compresses again, checked the bandages. A little bit of clear fluid was seeping through. Not blood, not pus, just lymph. The body trying to heal itself. That's it, she murmured. Keep fighting. Jasper's eyes opened. This time they were clearer. Still fever-bright, but focused. He looked at her for a long moment without speaking. You're real, he finally said. Last I checked, I thought... He swallowed, throat working. I thought you were a dream or a ghost. Sorry to disappoint. Not disappointed. His voice was barely a whisper. Surprised. That I'm real or that anyone came at all? Both. Eleanor found the canteen, lifted his head carefully, and held the water to his lips. He drank in small sips, most of it going down, some spilling down his chin. When she lowered his head back down, he was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What? Eleanor said. You're not from Copper Falls. I am actually. Work at the clinic there. No. Jasper shook his head weakly. I mean, you don't look like you're from there. You look... He paused, searching for words. Different. Eleanor's jaw tightened. Here it comes, she thought. Even half dead, even saved from the grave, men couldn't help themselves. Different how? She said, voice flat. Strong, Jasper said. Eleanor blinked. What? You look strong. He closed his eyes, exhausted from even that small conversation. Like you could wrestle a bear and win. It wasn't a compliment, not really, but it wasn't an insult either. It was just observation, stated as simple fact with no judgment attached. Eleanor didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing, just pulled the blanket higher on his chest and turned back to the fire. Behind her, Jasper's breathing evened out into sleep again. But this time, Eleanor was smiling. The storm broke on the third day. Eleanor woke to silence. Real silence. Not just the absence of wind, but the kind of deep quiet that came after a blizzard had exhausted itself. She pushed open the door and had to dig through 4 feet of snow to make a gap wide enough to squeeze through. The world outside was transformed. Every tree, every rock, every surface buried under white. The sky was a hard, bright blue, painful to look at. The sun reflecting off the snow was blinding, and the cold was vicious, the kind that turned spit to ice before it hit the ground, that made lungs ache just breathing. Eleanor stepped back inside, shut the door, and leaned against it. They were snowed in, completely. No way down the mountain until the trails were passable again, and that could take days, maybe a week. She looked at Jasper. He was awake, watching her from the cot. Storm's over, she said. How bad? Bad enough. We're not going anywhere for a while. Jasper nodded slowly, like he'd expected that. How long was I out? 3 days, give or take. He tried to sit up, made it about 6 inches before his face went white and he collapsed back down with a hiss of pain. Don't, Eleanor said sharply, crossing to him. You're still healing. Those wounds open up again. All my work was for nothing. I need to... He stopped, jaw clenched. I need to check the cabin, make sure... The cabin's fine. I've been maintaining the fire. We have enough wood for another few days if we're careful. Food? Enough. Not a feast, but we won't starve. Jasper's eyes tracked across the room, taking inventory, and Eleanor could see him doing calculations in his head. Supplies, rations, time. You should have left me, he said finally. Eleanor sat down in the chair by the cot. Probably. Why didn't you? Because I'm an idiot. That startled a laugh out of him, brief and painful, but real. Fair enough. Also because leaving people to die isn't really my style. Most people wouldn't have come at all. I noticed. Jasper was quiet for a moment. Then, Jacob told them I was hurt. He did. And they said no. Every single one of them. But you came anyway. Eleanor met his eyes. I came anyway. Why? She'd been asking herself the same question for 3 days. Why risk her life for a stranger? Why ride into a blizzard when everyone told her she'd die? Why care when no one else did? Because someone had to, she said finally, and I was the only one willing. Jasper studied her face like he was trying to memorize it. What's your name again? Eleanor Caldwell. Eleanor. He tested the word. I'm Jasper, but you already know that. I do. Thank you, Eleanor. The words were simple, quiet, but the weight behind them was enormous. Eleanor felt something shift in her chest, some wall she'd built up over years of mockery and dismissal, cracking just a little. You're welcome, she said. They fell into a routine after that, a strange, fragile routine built on necessity and proximity. Eleanor would wake first, build up the fire, make coffee. Jasper would wake to the smell of it, try to sit up, fail, and glare at the ceiling like it was personally responsible for his weakness. She'd change his bandages twice a day, cleaning the wounds with the last of her carbolic acid and repacking them with honey. The infection was retreating slowly, the red streaks fading, but he was still weak as a kitten. I used to be able to chop wood for 6 hours straight, he muttered one morning, while Eleanor helped him sit up enough to drink water. You used to have blood in your body, Eleanor said. Now drink. He drank. Then, because he was stubborn, I can walk. You can't. How do you know? Because yesterday you tried to stand up and fainted. Jasper scowled. I didn't faint. I got dizzy. You hit the floor so hard I thought you'd broken your skull. That's not fainting. What would you call it? A strategic retreat. Eleanor laughed. Actually laughed, the sound surprising her. She couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed. Jasper's scowl softened into something that might have been a smile. You have a nice laugh, he said. The words caught her off guard. Eleanor felt heat rise in her face and turned away quickly, busying herself with the bandages. Don't, she said. Don't what? Don't do that. Do what? Be charming, or whatever this is. I'm not being charming, Jasper said, genuinely confused. I'm being honest. Eleanor tied off the bandage harder than necessary. Same thing. It's not. It is when you're a woman who looks like me. Silence. Eleanor immediately regretted saying it. She didn't talk about this. Not ever. Didn't give voice to the thing that hung over every interaction she had with every person she met. But Jasper just said quietly, What's wrong with how you look? You know what's wrong. I don't, actually. Eleanor turned to face him, anger flaring hot and sudden. Don't play stupid. You have eyes. You can see I'm... She gestured vaguely at herself, the words catching in her throat. Strong? Jasper offered. Fat, Eleanor snapped. The word you're looking for is fat. That's not the word I was looking for. It's the word everyone else uses. Jasper held her gaze. I'm not everyone else. Eleanor wanted to argue, wanted to throw his words back in his face, prove him wrong, protect herself the way she'd learned to protect herself. But something in his eyes stopped her. He meant it. Whatever else was true, he meant it. The infection's clearing up, she said instead, changing the subject with all the grace of a falling anvil. Another few days and you should be able to move around without passing out. Eleanor, I'm going to check the food supplies. She stood and walked to the shelves before he could say anything else, because if he said one more kind thing, she was going to either cry or scream, and she wasn't sure which would be worse. Behind her, Jasper didn't push, just settled back against the cot with a soft exhale. But Eleanor could feel his eyes on her back, and for reasons she didn't want to examine, that didn't bother her as much as it should have. That night, the nightmare started. Eleanor woke to the sound of Jasper thrashing on the cot, blankets tangled around his legs, head whipping side to side. No! He was saying it over and over, voice thick with terror. No! Get back! Eleanor crossed to him, touched his shoulder. Jasper, wake up. He didn't wake. His hand shot out and grabbed her arm, grip bruising, eyes wide open but seeing nothing. Don't make me... His voice broke. Please don't make me... Jasper. Eleanor gripped his face with both hands, forcing him to look at her. You're safe. You're in the cabin. Wake up. His eyes focused, slowly, like he was surfacing from deep water. He stared at her, chest heaving, still halfway caught in whatever hell his mind had thrown him into. Eleanor? I'm here. He looked around the cabin, grounding himself, then down at his hand, still locked around her arm. He let go like she'd burned him. I'm sorry, he said, voice rough. I didn't mean... It's okay. It's not. I could have hurt you. But you didn't. Jasper pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. I don't sleep well. Haven't for years. Eleanor sat down on the edge of the cot. You want to talk about it? No? Okay. They sat in silence. The fire crackled. The wind outside was picking up again. Not a storm, just the mountain's constant, restless breath. It was a bear, Jasper said finally. Eleanor waited. The thing that attacked me. Grizzly. Old male. Probably driven out of its territory by a younger bear. Came into my camp while I was skinning a deer. I didn't hear it until it was too late. How did you survive? Knife. Got it in the ribs before it could finish me, but not before... He gestured at his shoulder. You're lucky to be alive. Am I? The question wasn't rhetorical. He really seemed to be asking. Eleanor frowned. Yes. Why? Because being alive is better than being dead. Is it? The flatness in his voice made something twist in Eleanor's chest. What happened to you? She asked quietly. Jasper was quiet for so long she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, I had a family, a wife, a daughter. Had. Past tense. Eleanor's throat tightened. Their names were Sarah and Lily, Jasper continued, voice distant. Sarah was a school teacher. Lily was 6, smart as a whip, always asking questions. He paused. There was a fire. In town. Started in the dry goods store. Spread fast. Sarah ran back into the house to get Lily. She'd been napping upstairs. I tried to follow, but the roof came down. I couldn't. He stopped, swallowed hard. I got out. They didn't. Eleanor didn't say she was sorry. Didn't say it wasn't his fault. Didn't say any of the useless, hollow things people said in the face of grief. She just reached out and took his hand. Jasper looked down at their joined hands like he'd forgotten what human touch felt like. That was 8 years ago, he said. Came up here after. Couldn't stand being around people anymore. Couldn't stand the looks, the pity. Couldn't stand waking up every day and remembering. But you kept waking up anyway. Didn't have much choice. There's always a choice, Eleanor said. You chose to keep going, even if it didn't feel like a choice at the time. Jasper's fingers tightened around hers. Not painful, just holding on. What about you? He asked. What about me? Why are you here? And I don't mean in this cabin. I mean, why are you in Copper Falls, working yourself to death for people who treat you like dirt? Eleanor looked at the fire. Because I'm good at what I do. And because someone has to take care of the people who can't take care of themselves. Even if those people are terrible. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Jasper studied her face. You ran away from something. It wasn't a question. Eleanor felt her defenses slam up. I didn't. It's okay, Jasper said quietly. I ran away too. That's how I know what it looks like. Eleanor wanted to deny it. Wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she'd chosen Copper Falls deliberately, that it was a career move and nothing more. But sitting in this cabin, in the middle of the night, with this man who'd lost everything and somehow still managed to see her, really see her, the lies felt too heavy to carry. I had a practice, she said. Back east, Philadelphia. Worked with a doctor there, learning, trying to become a real nurse. Not just someone who changes bedpans. What happened? I got good. Too good. Started delivering babies on my own, treating patients without supervision. The doctor didn't like it. Said I was overstepping. Said a woman, especially a woman who looked like me, had no business playing at medicine. So you left? So I got fired and blacklisted. Couldn't get work anywhere within 200 miles. Everyone knew everyone, and everyone knew I was trouble. She smiled, but there was no humor in it. So I came west, figured out here, where people were desperate enough, they might not care what I looked like or where I came from. Were you right? No, Eleanor said. They care just as much. They just don't have better options. Jasper's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it made her chest ache. Their loss? He said. Eleanor laughed, a short, sharp sound that was half sob. You don't even know me. I know enough. You know I'm stubborn and reckless and apparently have a death wish. I know you rode through a blizzard to save a stranger, Jasper said. I know you haven't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch in 3 days because you were too busy keeping me alive. I know you're the toughest person I've ever met. I'm not tough. Eleanor. He waited until she looked at him. Yes, you are. She wanted to argue, wanted to list all the ways she wasn't tough, all the times she'd cried herself to sleep, all the moments of weakness and doubt. But the way he was looking at her made the words die in her throat, like she was something rare, something valuable, like she mattered. Eleanor pulled her hand back, stood up too quickly, nearly tripped over her own feet. You should sleep, she said, voice unsteady. You need rest. Eleanor. Good night, Jasper. She turned away before he could see her face, before he could see the tears she was trying very hard not to shed. Behind her, Jasper was quiet for a long moment. Then softly, "Good night, Eleanor." She lay down by the fire, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like smoke and pine, and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion finally dragged her under. But even in sleep, she could still feel the warmth of his hand in hers. And for the first time in years, that didn't scare her. It felt like hope. Morning came with weak sunlight filtering through the shutters and the smell of coffee boiling over on the fire. Eleanor jerked awake, scrambled to pull the pot off the flames before it made a bigger mess. Her hands were clumsy with sleep, and she slopped hot coffee across her knuckles in the process. "Damn it," she hissed, shaking her hand. "You okay?" Jasper's voice from the cot, rough but alert. "Fine, just clumsy." She poured what was left of the coffee into 2 cups, carried one over to him. He'd managed to prop himself up on one elbow without passing out this time, which was progress. "Here," she said, holding out the cup. Their fingers brushed when he took it. Eleanor pulled back too quickly, spilling coffee on the blanket. Jasper noticed. Of course he noticed. But he didn't say anything, just sipped the coffee and made a face. "What?" Eleanor said, more defensive than she meant to be. "Nothing. It's just strong. You want weak coffee, you can make it yourself." "Didn't say I didn't like it." He took another sip. "Just takes some getting used to." Eleanor sat in the chair, wrapping her hands around her own cup for warmth. The cabin was cold in the mornings, the fire always burning low by dawn. They drank in silence. Not uncomfortable exactly, but waited, like they were both thinking about last night and neither wanted to be the first to mention it. Finally, Jasper said, "I shouldn't have—" "Don't," Eleanor interrupted. "Don't apologize for telling me about your family," I asked. "Still, it's not your burden to carry." "Maybe I wanted to carry it." Jasper looked at her over the rim of his cup, something unreadable in his eyes. "Why?" "Because you carried mine." Eleanor stared into her coffee. "Nobody ever asks me why I came west. Nobody cares, but you asked. So I'm returning the favor." "That's not how it works." "Why not?" "Because my grief is—" He stopped, searching for words. "It's old, settled, like scar tissue. Yours is still raw." "How would you know?" "Because I recognize the look." Jasper set his cup down on the floor beside the cot. "You wear it the same way I did those first few years, like you're waiting for someone to notice you're bleeding." Eleanor's throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. "Everyone's noticed," she said finally. "They just don't care." "I care." The words hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. Eleanor set her cup down before she dropped it. Her hands were shaking again. "You don't know me," she said, and hated how small her voice sounded. "I know you saved my life." "That's not the same as knowing someone, isn't it?" Jasper shifted on the cot, wincing as his wounds pulled. "I've lived alone for 8 years, Eleanor. Haven't had a real conversation with another human being in all that time. And in 4 days, you've shown me more kindness than I've experienced in the last decade. So, yeah, maybe I don't know your favorite color or what you like to eat for breakfast. But I know what matters." Eleanor stood abruptly. "I need to check your bandages." "Eleanor, lie down." Jasper held her gaze for another long moment, then settled back against the cot without argument. Eleanor unwrapped the bandages with hands that were steadier than she felt. The wounds were healing well. The honey had done its job, drawing out the infection, keeping the flesh clean. The deepest lacerations were still ugly, red and puckered where she'd stitched them closed. But there was no smell of rot, no spreading darkness. "You're lucky," she said, focusing on the work and not on his face. "Another day without treatment, and you'd be dead." "I know. The scars are going to be bad." "Don't care about scars." Eleanor glanced up despite herself. "Most men would." "I'm not most men." Jasper's eyes were on hers, steady and serious. "And scars just mean you survived something that tried to kill you. Nothing shameful in that." Eleanor thought about her own scars, not the visible kind, but the ones that lived under her skin, carved by years of mockery and dismissal and being treated like she was less than human. "No," she said quietly. "I suppose there's not." She finished rebandaging the wounds in silence, then stepped back. "You should try to walk today, just a few steps. Your muscles need to remember how." You want me to fall on my face again? I want you to build your strength back, unless you're planning to live in that cot permanently. Jasper pushed himself upright, teeth gritted against the pain. How do you know I wasn't? Because you're too stubborn. Takes one to know one. Eleanor couldn't help it. She smiled. Fair point. He swung his legs over the side of the cot, moving slow and careful. His face had gone pale, a thin sheen of sweat on his forehead, but he didn't stop. Easy, Eleanor said, moving closer in case he started to topple. Don't push too hard. Little late for that advice. He stood, swayed. Eleanor grabbed his arm to steady him, and for a second they were close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his skin. Okay? She asked. Yeah. His voice was tight. Just give me a second. They stood there, Eleanor holding his arm, Jasper breathing hard and trying not to fall over. Close enough that she could count the days of beard growth on his jaw, see the flecks of darker gray in his eyes. Close enough to be dangerous. Take a step, she said. Jasper did. Then another. His legs shook, muscles weak from days of disuse and blood loss, but he stayed upright. 3 steps. 4. Then his knee buckled. Eleanor caught him before he hit the floor, taking his weight against her shoulder, staggering under the sudden burden but not falling. I've got you, she said. Jasper's arm came around her back, holding on, not because he was trying to be close, just because he needed the support. But Eleanor felt it anyway. The warmth of him, the solid weight, the way his breath stirred her hair. You're stronger than you look, he said, voice rough. I get that a lot. Eleanor helped him back to the cot, lowering him down as gently as she could. Usually it's not a compliment. It is from me. She got him settled, pulled the blanket back over him. His hand caught hers before she could pull away. Eleanor. She looked at him. Thank you, he said, for all of this, for coming here, for staying, for... He shook his head. I don't have words for what you've done. You don't need words. Yes, I do. Because when we get out of here, you're going back to that town, back to those people, and I need you to know that what they think about you is wrong. Eleanor's eyes burned. She blinked hard, refusing to cry. They think I'm fat and useless and taking up space I don't deserve, she said, the words coming out harsh and bitter. How is that wrong? Because you're not useless. You're the furthest thing from useless I've ever seen. Jasper's grip on her hand tightened. You're a healer, Eleanor, a real one. The kind that saves lives, not because it's your job, but because you can't stand to watch people suffer. That town doesn't deserve you. Then what does? The question slipped out before she could stop it, raw and desperate and far too honest. Jasper pulled her closer. Not rough, but deliberate, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone, and for one impossible moment Eleanor thought he was going to kiss her. But he didn't. Instead he pressed his forehead to hers, eyes closed, breathing her in like she was oxygen, and he'd been drowning. Something better, he whispered. You deserve something so much better than what they've given you. Eleanor's breath hitched. Her free hand came up to rest on his chest, feeling his heartbeat under her palm. They stayed like that, frozen in the space between what was and what could be. Then Jasper's strength gave out. He sagged back against the cot, hand slipping from her face, and the moment shattered. Eleanor stepped back, heart racing, hands shaking. You need to rest, she said, voice barely steady. Eleanor. Rest, Jasper. She turned away before he could say anything else, before she could do something stupid like climb into that cot with him and damn the consequences. Outside, the wind picked up. Not a storm. Just a reminder that winter wasn't done with them yet. Eleanor pressed her hands to her face and tried to remember how to breathe. The day passed in careful avoidance. Eleanor busied herself with tasks that didn't require her to look at Jasper too closely. Inventorying supplies, melting snow for water, reorganizing the shelves for no reason except it gave her something to do with her hands. Jasper watched her from the cot, saying nothing, but she could feel his eyes tracking her movements. By evening, she'd run out of distractions. She made dinner, beans and salt pork heated over the fire, not enough to be satisfying but enough to keep them alive. They ate in silence, the space between them thick with unspoken things. Eleanor, Jasper said finally, setting his empty plate aside. We need to talk. No, we don't. Yes, we do. There's nothing to talk about. Bullshit. The word was delivered without heat, just flat statement of fact. Eleanor set her own plate down harder than necessary. Fine. What do you want to talk about? This morning. What about it? Don't play stupid. You know what I'm talking about. Eleanor stood, started pacing. The cabin was too small for pacing, but she did it anyway. You were weak, emotional. You didn't know what you were saying. I knew exactly what I was saying. You've been half dead for almost a week. Your judgment is compromised. My judgment is fine. It's not. Eleanor spun to face him. You're lonely and hurt, and I'm the only person who's been nice to you in 8 years. That's not real. That's just proximity and desperation. Jasper's jaw tightened. You think I don't know the difference? I think you want to believe there's a difference. And I think you're scared. The accusation hit like a slap. I'm not scared, Eleanor said. Yes, you are. You're terrified. Because if you admit that maybe someone could actually care about you, that means you'd have to stop hiding behind the idea that you're unlovable. I'm not hiding. Then what do you call this? Jasper gestured at the space between them. Running away every time we get close? Telling yourself I don't mean what I say? That's hiding, Eleanor. You don't know me, she said again, desperately. You don't know what you're asking. I'm not asking for anything. Jasper's voice softened. I'm just telling you the truth. And the truth is that you scare the hell out of me, but in a good way. The kind of way that makes me think maybe I don't want to spend the rest of my life alone in this cabin. Eleanor's breath caught. Don't, she whispered. Please don't say things like that. Why not? Because when this is over, when we get back down that mountain, you're going to wake up and realize you made a mistake. You're going to see me in daylight, around other people, and you're going to understand that I'm exactly what they say I am. And what's that? Too much. The words broke on the way out. Too big, too loud, too difficult, too everything. I'm always too much for people, Jasper. Always. And I can't... Her voice cracked. I can't watch you realize that too. Jasper tried to stand. Eleanor moved to stop him, but he waved her off, pushing himself upright through sheer force of will. He crossed the space between them in 3 unsteady steps and caught her face in both hands. Listen to me, he said, and his voice was rough but certain. I spent 8 years in this cabin because I couldn't stand to be around people. Couldn't stand their pity, their questions, their expectations. I came up here to die slowly and alone because that seemed easier than living. Eleanor tried to look away. He wouldn't let her. Then you showed up, he continued, rode through a blizzard, saved my life, stayed when you could have left, and for the first time in 8 years I felt something other than numb. His thumbs brushed across her cheeks, catching tears she hadn't realized were falling. So don't tell me I don't know what I'm saying. Don't tell me this is just loneliness or proximity. I know what it feels like to want to live again, Eleanor, and it feels like you. Jasper, he kissed her, not gentle, not careful, just desperate and honest and real. Eleanor froze for half a heartbeat, shock stealing her breath. Then she kissed him back, her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer even as some rational part of her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea, that he was still healing, that she was going to hurt him. But Jasper didn't seem to care about hurt. His arms came around her, solid and strong, despite the weakness still in his limbs, and he kissed her like she was air and water and everything he needed to survive. Eleanor had been kissed before. Awkward fumbling in dark corners with men who wanted to see what it was like to be with someone like her. Men who treated her like a curiosity or a dare, like she should be grateful for their attention. This wasn't that. This was hunger and recognition, and something close to reverence. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jasper pressed his forehead to hers again. Still think I don't know what I want? He said. Eleanor's laugh came out shaky. You're going to tear your stitches. Worth it. It's not. I didn't work this hard to keep you alive just so you could kill yourself kissing me. Sounds like a good way to go. Jasper. She pulled back enough to look at him, really look at him. This can't. Why not? Because it's impossible. Because I live in Copper Falls and you live here, and the world doesn't work like this. The world works however we make it work. That's not true. It could be. His hands were still on her face, gentle now. It could be if we let it. Eleanor wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it physically hurt, but she'd spent too many years learning that wanting things didn't make them real. When the snow melts, she said quietly, we'll go back down. You'll heal, I'll go back to work. And we'll both remember this as, she struggled for the word, as something that happened during a crisis. Nothing more. Jasper's expression didn't change. You really believe that? I have to. Why? Because the alternative is too much to hope for. He studied her face for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded and stepped back. Okay, he said. Eleanor blinked. Okay? If that's what you need to believe right now, okay. I'm not going to push. He lowered himself back onto the cot, moving carefully. But Eleanor? What? I'm not going anywhere. And when you're ready to stop being scared, I'll still be here. Eleanor didn't trust herself to speak, just nodded and turned back to the fire. Behind her, she heard Jasper settle into the cot, heard his breathing even out. But sleep was a long time coming for both of them. 2 more days passed. The temperature dropped even further. The world outside became a crystalline wasteland, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. Jasper grew stronger. He could walk the length of the cabin now without collapsing, could help with small tasks like feeding the fire or preparing food. The wounds were healing into thick pink scars that would mark him for the rest of his life. Eleanor kept her distance, or tried to. But in a cabin this small, distance was relative. They'd brush past each other, reaching for supplies. Their hands would touch while passing a cup of coffee. She'd help him change his bandages and feel the heat of his skin against her palms, and have to work very hard not to think about what it had felt like when he kissed her. Neither of them mentioned it, but it hung between them like smoke. On the 8th night, the fever returned. Eleanor woke to the sound of Jasper's harsh breathing, rapid and shallow. She was across the cabin in seconds, hand on his forehead, burning. No, she said out loud. No, no, no. She threw back the blankets. The bandages on his shoulder were soaked through with blood and something else. Thick, yellow discharge. One of the deeper wounds had reopened. Infection flooding back in, overwhelming his system. All her work undone. Eleanor's hands moved on autopilot, grabbing supplies, heating water, preparing to fight this battle all over again. But when she peeled back the bandages, what she saw made her stomach drop. The wound wasn't just infected, it was necrotic. Dead tissue spreading from the deepest part of the laceration, black and rotting. She needed to cut it out. Had to debride the wound, remove every bit of dead flesh, or the infection would spread to his blood and kill him within hours. But to do that, she'd need him conscious, need him to hold still while she carved away pieces of his own body. Jasper. She shook his shoulder. Jasper, wake up. His eyes opened, glassy and unfocused. Eleanor? I need you to listen to me. The infection is back. It's bad. I have to cut away the dead tissue or you're going to die. Do you understand? He blinked slowly, trying to process through the fever. Okay. It's going to hurt. Worse than anything so far. Okay. I don't have enough laudanum to put you under. You're going to be awake for all of it. Jasper's hand found hers, gripped tight. I trust you. Eleanor's eyes burned. Don't. I don't know if I can do this without... Yes, you can. His voice was weak but certain. You're the strongest person I know. If anyone can save me, it's you. Eleanor wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she was scared out of her mind, that she'd never done anything like this before. But there wasn't time. She gave him what was left of the laudanum, barely enough to take the edge off, and positioned him so she could reach the wound. Then she picked up the scalpel. Hold on to the bed frame, she said. Don't let go, no matter what. Jasper's good hand wrapped around the wood, knuckles going white. Eleanor cut. The scream he made was inhuman. She didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Just kept cutting, removing the blackened tissue piece by piece, working as fast as she dared while Jasper thrashed and screamed and begged her to stop. She didn't stop. Blood everywhere. On her hands, her clothes, the floor. She was soaked in it, drowning in it, but she kept cutting. Please. Jasper's voice was raw, broken. Please, Eleanor. Almost done, she said, though she wasn't sure if that was true. Just hold on. Another cut. Another piece of dead flesh removed. Jasper's hand shot out, grabbed her arm. I can't. You can. Eleanor looked at him, forced him to meet her eyes. Stay with me, Jasper. Don't you dare leave me now. Something in her voice must have reached him. His grip on her arm shifted, became less panicked, more grounding. Talk to me, he gasped. Please, just talk to me. Eleanor kept working, kept cutting, and talked. When I was a little girl, she said, voice shaking but steady, I wanted to be a dancer. Isn't that stupid? I was always big even then, and everyone said I was too clumsy, too heavy. But I didn't care. I used to practice in secret, in the barn behind our house. Made up my own dances. Another cut. Jasper made a choked sound but didn't scream. My mother caught me once, Eleanor continued. She didn't yell, just watched for a while. Then she said, Eleanor, the world is going to tell you 1,000 things you can't be. Don't ever let that stop you from trying. She could see clean tissue now, just a little more. So I kept dancing, even when people laughed, even when they said I looked ridiculous, because it made me happy, and I decided that was enough. One more cut. The last piece of necrotic tissue came away. Eleanor set down the scalpel with shaking hands and reached for the carbolic acid. This is going to burn, she warned. Jasper just nodded, beyond words. She fleshed the wound. He arched off the cot, the tendons in his neck standing out like cables, but he didn't let go of the bed frame. Almost done, Eleanor said. I swear, almost done. She packed the wound with honey-soaked cloth, bandaged it tight, and finally, let herself step back. Jasper collapsed against the cot, shaking violently, face gray and slicked with sweat. Eleanor crawled onto the cot beside him, pulled his head into her lap, and just held him while he shook. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Not your fault. His voice was barely there. You saved me. Again. I hurt you. You saved me, he repeated, more firmly this time. They stayed like that, Jasper's head in her lap, Eleanor's hand stroking his hair, while the fire burned low and the night stretched on forever. Slowly, the shaking stopped. His breathing evened out. The fever didn't break, but it didn't climb higher either. Eleanor, he said after a long silence. Yeah? Do you still dance? The question caught her off guard. She almost laughed. No, not in years. Why not? Because I grew up, because dancing doesn't pay bills or save lives. That's not why. Eleanor looked down at him. Then why? Because you stopped believing you deserved to be happy. The words hit like a physical blow. That's not... It is. Jasper's hand found hers, laced their fingers together. You spend all your time taking care of other people, making sure everyone else is okay. But you don't do anything for yourself. Don't let yourself have anything good. I have my work. That's not the same as being happy. Eleanor's throat tightened. Maybe I don't know how to be happy anymore. Then learn. Jasper squeezed her hand. Learn with me. Jasper, I know you're scared. I know you think this is impossible. But Eleanor, I don't want to go back to being alone. I don't want to wake up every morning and count the hours until I can go back to sleep. I want... His voice broke. I want to wake up and have something to live for. Someone to live for. Eleanor bent down, pressed her forehead to his. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. He turned his head, kissed her palm. But maybe we can figure it out together. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the fire crackled. And in the space between fear and hope, Eleanor made a choice. She kissed him, soft and careful, mindful of his pain, but deliberate. When she pulled back, Jasper was smiling, weak but real. Is that a yes? He asked. It's a maybe, Eleanor said. It's a let's survive this first and see what happens. I'll take it. She settled beside him on the cot, his head still in her lap, her hand still in his. And for the first time since riding into that storm, Eleanor let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved this. Deserved him. Deserved to be happy. The fever broke just before dawn. Eleanor woke to sunlight streaming through the gaps in the shutters, brighter than it had been in days. She'd fallen asleep sitting up against the wall beside the cot, Jasper's hand still wrapped around hers. She touched his forehead carefully, hardly daring to hope. Cool. Not cold, but normal. Human. The fever had broken. Relief hit her so hard she had to put her head between her knees to keep from passing out. Her whole body shook with it, days of terror and exhaustion finally catching up now that the immediate crisis had passed. Eleanor? She looked up. Jasper's eyes were open, clear for the first time in almost 24 hours. Hey, she said, voice rough. You look terrible. A laugh burst out of her, half sob. You're one to talk. How long was I out? Most of the night. The fever broke about an hour ago. She reached for the water, helped him drink. How do you feel? Like I got mauled by a bear, then had someone cut pieces out of me with a knife. That's pretty accurate. Jasper managed a weak smile. You saved me again. I also hurt you, pretty badly. You did what you had to do. His fingers tightened around hers. I meant what I said last night. I trust you. Eleanor looked down at their joined hands. In daylight, with both of them conscious and clear-headed, everything felt different, more real, more terrifying. Jasper, about what I said. Don't. He cut her off gently. Don't take it back. Not yet. I wasn't going to take it back. I was going to say that I meant it too. The maybe part. Something in his expression softened. Yeah? Yeah, but we need to talk about what happens when we leave here. Okay? I mean, really talk, because this... She gestured at the cabin, at them. This is one thing. Out there is something else entirely. Before Jasper could respond, they heard it. Voices. Multiple voices coming up the mountain. Eleanor was on her feet in seconds, crossing to the window. Through the gaps in the shutters, she could see movement, dark shapes against the snow, 3 or 4 of them, maybe more. Someone's coming, she said. Jasper tried to sit up. Who? I don't know, can't see clearly enough. The voices got louder, closer, then a fist pounded on the door. Eleanor Caldwell, a man's voice, loud and official. This is Sheriff Wilkes. Open this door. Eleanor and Jasper exchanged looks. Don't, Jasper said quietly. I have to. If I don't, they'll break it down. Eleanor, but she was already crossing to the door, unbarring it, pulling it open. Sheriff Wilkes stood on the other side, flanked by 3 men Eleanor recognized from town, Samuel Trotter and 2 of his mining friends, all of them armed, all of them looking at her like she was something dangerous. Miss Caldwell, Wilkes said, voice flat, you're alive. Disappointed? Surprised. We expected to find your frozen corpse. Sorry to disappoint. Eleanor didn't move from the doorway. What do you want? We're here for Jasper Kane. Why? Because he's wanted for questioning in connection with the deaths of 2 trappers last fall, and because we have reason to believe you're being held against your will. Eleanor stared at him. You can't be serious. Dead serious. Wilkes's hand rested on his gun belt, casual but unmistakable. Now, step aside. No. Miss Caldwell. I said no. Eleanor planted her feet. Jasper Kane hasn't done anything wrong, and I'm not being held against my will. I came here to save his life, and I'm not leaving until he's strong enough to travel. That's not your decision to make. The hell it isn't. I'm a medical professional, and he's my patient. You want to take him, you'll have to go through me. Samuel Trotter laughed. That won't take much. Eleanor's jaw tightened. Try it and find out. Wilkes held up a hand. Nobody's going through anybody. Miss Caldwell, be reasonable. We rode all the way up here in the cold to make sure you were safe. Now we're asking you to step aside and let us do our job. Your job is to protect people, not haul innocent men out of their homes based on rumors. It's not rumors. 2 men disappeared last October. Both were last seen heading into this territory, and Jasper Kane has a history of violence. What history? Eleanor demanded. Wilkes's expression didn't change. He killed a man in Silver Ridge, beat him to death in the street. The words hung in the air like smoke. Eleanor felt ice spread through her chest. She turned, looked back at Jasper. He was sitting up on the cot now, face pale but composed, and he didn't deny it. "Is that true?" she asked. Jasper met her eyes. "Yes." "See?" Wilkes said. "Now step aside." But Eleanor didn't move. She looked at Jasper, really looked at him, and saw not guilt but grief. Old grief, worn smooth by years of carrying it. "Why?" she asked him. "He killed my family." Jasper's voice was flat, dead. "The man in Silver Ridge. He started the fire that burned down my house. Did it for insurance money, thought the building was empty. When he found out Sarah and Lily died, he tried to run. I caught him." "And you beat him to death?" "Yes." Eleanor turned back to Wilkes. "Sounds like justice to me." "That's not how the law works. The law didn't do a damn thing for his family, so he took care of it himself. And he'll answer for that," Wilkes said. "Now for the last time, step aside." "No." Wilkes's patience was wearing thin. "Miss Caldwell, I'm trying to be civil here." "Civil?" Eleanor's voice rose. "You let me ride into a blizzard thinking I'd die. You stood in that street and laughed. And now you come up here pretending you care about my safety? You don't care about me. You never did. You just want an excuse to drag him down that mountain. He's a murderer. He's a man who lost everything and did what he had to do. That's not the same thing." "The law says it is." "Then the law is wrong." Wilkes's hand moved to his gun. "I'm done asking nicely." Eleanor didn't flinch. "Then shoot me, because I'm not moving." For a long moment, nobody breathed. Then Jasper spoke from behind her. "Eleanor, let them in." She spun around. "No." "Yes." He was on his feet now, swaying but upright. "This isn't your fight." "Like hell it isn't. I killed a man. I knew there'd be consequences eventually. I'm not going to let you get hurt trying to protect me. I'm not letting them take you. You don't have a choice. I do. And I'm choosing you." The words came out fierce and certain, and Eleanor realized as she said them that they were true. Not just about this moment, about everything. She was choosing him, choosing to believe in something better than what she'd had, choosing to fight for it. Jasper's expression cracked. "Eleanor, no. You don't get to do this. You don't get to make me care about you and then give up." "I'm not giving up. I'm being practical." "Practical is letting them haul you off to hang for something you did 8 years ago?" "I won't hang. Worst case, I'll serve time. Best case, you disappear and I never see you again." Eleanor's voice broke. "Is that what you want?" "Of course not. But I won't put you in danger." "Too late. I'm already in danger. I was in danger the second I rode up this mountain." She crossed to him, took his face in her hands. "So if we're doing this, we're doing it together, understand?" Behind them, Wilkes cleared his throat. "This is real touching, but we're still coming in." Eleanor didn't take her eyes off Jasper. "What do you want to do?" "I want to tell you to run. Get out of here while you still can. Not an option." "Eleanor, what do you want?" Jasper looked at her for a long moment, then quietly, "I want to fight." "Then we fight." She turned back to Wilkes, stepping in front of Jasper again. "He's not going anywhere, not until he's healed. And if you try to force him, I'll make sure everyone in Copper Falls knows exactly what kind of sheriff you are." "And what kind is that?" "The kind who abandons women to die in blizzards and harasses innocent men based on 8-year-old crimes that were already settled." "It wasn't settled. He ran before he could stand trial, because there was nothing left for him there." Eleanor's voice was steady now, certain. "His family was dead. The man who killed them was dead. What was the point of staying?" "The point is justice. Justice was already served. He just didn't wait for you to tell him it was okay." Samuel Trotter stepped forward. "Sheriff, we wasting time talking to her. Just go in and drag him out." "Try it," Eleanor said. "You gonna stop us?" Samuel sneered. "You can barely fit through that door yourself." "Maybe not, but I can make your life hell when we get back to town. I know things about you, Samuel, things your wife would be real interested to hear." Samuel's face darkened. "You threatening me?" "I'm telling you that if you lay one hand on Jasper Kane, I will make sure every dirty secret you've ever tried to hide comes out. And I know plenty." "Like what?" "Like the fact that you've been skimming gold from your claim and blaming the shortfall on your partners. Like the fact that you've got a girl in Silver Ridge you visit every month and tell your wife it's business. Like the fact that you beat your dog so bad last year it had to be put down and you told everyone it got sick. Samuel went pale. Eleanor turned to the other men. And I know things about all of you. Every person who's ever come through that clinic with injuries they didn't want to explain or symptoms they needed to keep quiet. You think I don't keep records? You think I don't remember? The silence was thick enough to cut. Wilkes studied her with new eyes. You're bluffing. Am I? You want to test that theory? Another long pause, then Wilkes said, What do you want? I want you to leave. Now. And I want you to leave Jasper alone. Can't do that. He's wanted for something that happened 8 years ago in another territory. You don't have jurisdiction. And even if you did, you don't have proof he did anything to those trappers. You just have rumors and convenience. The disappearances could be explained 100 different ways. Men die in the mountains all the time. Doesn't mean Jasper killed them. Wilkes's jaw worked. You're protecting a criminal. I'm protecting a patient. There's a difference. Not in the eyes of the law. Then maybe the law needs better eyes. They stared at each other across the threshold. Behind Eleanor, she could hear Jasper's ragged breathing, could feel him preparing to intervene if this went bad. But it was Wilkes who broke first. Fine, he said. We'll leave, for now. But this isn't over, Miss Caldwell. When you come back down that mountain, we're going to have a long conversation about your conduct. Looking forward to it. Wilkes gestured to the other men. They turned, started back down the trail. Samuel looked back once, face twisted with rage and humiliation. You're going to regret this. Probably, Eleanor said, but not today. She watched until they disappeared into the trees. Then she closed the door, barred it, and sagged against it. Her legs were shaking so badly she could barely stand. Eleanor? Jasper was beside her, arm around her waist, holding her up. You okay? No. Yes. I don't know. She looked at him. Did you kill those trappers? No. Do you know what happened to them? I have a guess. There's a ravine about 3 miles north of here. Deep, narrow, easy to miss if you don't know the territory. If they were traveling at night or in bad weather, they could have walked right off the edge. And nobody thought to check? Why would they? Easier to blame the hermit living in the woods. Eleanor closed her eyes. I just made a lot of enemies. Yeah, you did. They're going to make my life hell when I get back. Probably. I might lose my job. Wouldn't surprise me. Eleanor opened her eyes, looked at him. Was it worth it? Jasper's hand came up to cup her face. You stood up to armed men to protect me. You threatened them. You put your entire life on the line for someone you barely know. So yeah, it was worth it. I know you, Eleanor said. Maybe not everything, but I know what matters. Which is? That you're a good man who did a bad thing for the right reasons, and that you're trying to be better than you were. Jasper's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. I don't know if I can be better. I've spent 8 years being alone, being angry. I don't know how to be anything else. Then learn. Like you said, we'll figure it out together. He kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise. When they broke apart, Eleanor was smiling despite everything. We're probably both crazy, she said. Definitely. This is never going to work. Probably not. But we're going to try anyway. Yeah. Jasper pulled her closer, careful of his injuries. We are. Outside, the sun was shining. The snow was starting to melt. And somewhere down the mountain, trouble was waiting. But in the cabin, wrapped in each other's arms, Eleanor and Jasper chose to believe, just for a moment, that they could face it together, that they could win. The next few days passed in a strange kind of peace. Jasper grew stronger. He could walk the full length of the cabin without needing to rest, could help with chores, could stay upright for hours at a time without his vision graying at the edges. Eleanor monitored his progress with professional detachment during the day and curled up beside him at night, the two of them sharing the narrow cot because neither could sleep alone anymore. They talked about everything and nothing, about their pasts, their fears, the futures they weren't sure they'd have. What will you do? Jasper asked one night, both of them lying in the dark, his arm around her shoulders. When we go back down, I don't know. Depends on whether Wilkes follows through on his threats. He will. Men like that don't forget being embarrassed. Then I'll deal with it. Eleanor traced idle patterns on his chest, careful to avoid the bandages. Worst case, I lose my position at the clinic. Best case, I lose it and get run out of town completely. That's your best case? If I'm getting run out anyway, might as well make it count. Jasper was quiet for a moment. Then, come here. I'm already here. I mean, here. To the cabin. Stay with me. Eleanor's hand stilled. Jasper, I know it's not much, and I know it's isolated, but it's mine, free and clear. No rent, no landlord. We'd have enough supplies to make it through next winter if we're careful, and I can hunt, trap, trade in town when we need things. You want me to give up medicine and live in the woods. I want you to be somewhere you're valued, somewhere you're not mocked every time you leave the house. Eleanor sat up, pulling away from him. I can't just abandon my work. People need me. People treat you like garbage. Not all of them. Some of them, the ones who are really desperate, they appreciate what I do. And that's enough for you? Scraps of appreciation from people who only tolerate you because they have no other choice? The words stung because they were true. Eleanor stood, started pacing. It's not about appreciation. It's about making a difference, about using my skills to save lives. You can save lives here. People in these mountains get hurt all the time. Trappers, hunters, prospectors. You could help them. That's not the same as having a real practice. Why not? Because, Eleanor struggled for words. Because it's giving up. It's letting them win. I've spent my whole life being told I don't belong, that I should hide away somewhere out of sight. And if I come here, if I isolate myself in these mountains, that's exactly what I'd be doing. Jasper got up, moved to her. Or you'd be choosing to build a life on your own terms instead of theirs. It's not that simple. Why not? Because I don't want to be hidden away like I'm something shameful. I want to walk down a street and have people see me as a person, not as... Her voice cracked. Not as a joke. Then we'll go somewhere else, somewhere new. Start over where nobody knows either of us. Running away doesn't solve anything. Neither does staying somewhere you're miserable. Eleanor turned to face him. I'm not miserable. She stopped. Tried again. I'm useful. And that's something. Useful isn't the same as happy. Maybe happy is too much to ask for. It's not. Jasper took her hands. Eleanor, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to wake up every morning and not have to fight for basic human decency. You deserve a life that doesn't require you to be grateful for crumbs. And you think hiding in the woods is that life? I think being with someone who sees you, really sees you, is that life, wherever it happens to be. Eleanor wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons why this was impossible, why it would never work, why she couldn't just abandon everything she'd built. But the truth was, she hadn't built anything. She'd survived, that was all. And maybe survival wasn't enough anymore. I need time, she said finally, to think, to figure out what I want. Okay. And I need you to understand that this, us, it's happening fast, maybe too fast. I know. We barely know each other. I know that too. Jasper pulled her closer. But I also know that I've been half dead for 8 years and you made me want to live again. That's not nothing. No, Eleanor said softly. It's not nothing. She let him hold her, let herself believe for just a moment that this could work, that they could find a way to be together that didn't require one of them to sacrifice everything. But in the back of her mind, doubt whispered. And Eleanor had learned long ago to listen to doubt. It kept you alive, kept you from hoping for things that would only break your heart. Outside, the snow continued to melt. The trails were clearing. Soon they'd be able to leave. Soon they'd have to face the world again. And Eleanor wasn't sure either of them was ready for what that world would do to them. On the 12th day, they prepared to leave. The trails were passable now. The worst of the snow melted or packed down hard enough to travel. Jasper was strong enough to walk. Not far, and not fast, but enough. Eleanor packed her medical bag with what little supplies remained. Jasper gathered food for the journey, secured the cabin, banked the fire. Neither of them talked much. There wasn't much to say. At the door, Jasper paused. We could stay. One more day. Make sure I'm really strong enough. Eleanor looked at him, saw the hope in his eyes, the fear underneath it. We could, she agreed, but it wouldn't change anything. Might give us more time to figure things out. Or it might make it harder to leave. Jasper nodded slowly. Yeah. Eleanor reached for his hand. Whatever happens down there, I want you to know, this mattered. You matter. Eleanor, let me finish. I came up here to save your life. But you saved mine too. You made me remember what it feels like to be seen as something other than a problem. And her voice caught. I won't forget that. Jasper pulled her close, pressed his forehead to hers. This isn't over. You know that, right? I know we're going to try. That's all I can promise right now. Then I'll take it. They kissed, long and slow and bittersweet. Then Eleanor pulled away, shouldered her bag, and opened the door. The world outside was blindingly bright, the sun reflecting off snow and ice until everything was white and sharp and cold. They started down the mountain. The journey took hours. Jasper moved slowly, his strength already flagging halfway down. Eleanor stayed close, ready to catch him if he stumbled. But he didn't stumble, just kept putting one foot in front of the other, jaw set with determination. By the time Copper Falls came into view, smoke rising from chimneys, the muddy main street cutting through the center, the sun was low on the horizon. They stopped at the edge of town. You ready? Jasper asked. Eleanor looked at the buildings, the people moving between them, the life she'd left behind almost 2 weeks ago. No, she said honestly, but I don't think I'll ever be ready, so we might as well get it over with. They walked into town together. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. Eleanor kept her eyes forward, kept walking, acutely aware of Jasper beside her and the weight of every stare. They made it as far as the clinic before Sheriff Wilkes stepped into their path. Miss Caldwell, he said, Mr. Kane, we need to talk. Not now, Eleanor said. My patient needs rest. Your patient is under arrest. On what charges? Suspicion of murder, obstruction of justice. Take your pick. Jasper's hand tightened on Eleanor's arm. Don't. But Eleanor stepped forward, putting herself between Wilkes and Jasper for the second time in as many weeks. You want him? She said, voice carrying across the street. Then you'll have to go through me. Again. Wilkes's expression hardened. I was hoping you'd be reasonable. Reasonable went out the window when you left me to die in a blizzard. You chose to ride out. And you chose to let me. So here we are. The crowd was growing now, people spilling out of buildings, gathering to watch. Eleanor raised her voice. Sheriff Wilkes wants to arrest Jasper Kane for murder, for crimes he didn't commit, for disappearances that have nothing to do with him. Because it's easier to blame a hermit than to admit you don't know what happened. That's not true, Wilkes said. Isn't it? Have you investigated those disappearances? Have you searched for the bodies? Have you talked to anyone who actually saw anything? Or did you just decide it was Jasper because he's convenient? Wilkes's jaw tightened. The law. The law requires evidence. Do you have any? Silence. Eleanor turned to this crowd. He doesn't. Because there isn't any. Jasper Kane is guilty of one thing, wanting to be left alone. And apparently in this town, that's crime enough. He killed a man in Silver Ridge, someone shouted. Yes, he did. A man who murdered his wife and daughter and got away with it. And if any of you had lost your families the same way, you'd have done the same thing. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Not agreement, exactly, but not disagreement either. Eleanor pressed her advantage. I rode into a blizzard to save this man's life. I stayed with him for almost 2 weeks while he fought off infection that should have killed him. I know him. And I'm telling you, he's not a murderer. He's just a man who's been grieving for 8 years and trying to survive. That's real touching, Wilkes said, but it doesn't change anything. Then what will? What do you need to leave him alone? I need him to stand trial for what he did in Silver Ridge. That was 8 years ago. Law doesn't have a statute of limitations on murder. Eleanor looked at Jasper. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Then he stepped forward. She's right, he said. About most of it, anyway. I didn't kill those trappers. But I did kill that man in Silver Ridge. And I knew eventually I'd have to answer for it. Jasper, don't... Eleanor started. Eleanor, it's okay. He looked at Wilkes. I'll go with you. I'll stand trial. But you leave Eleanor out of this. She didn't do anything except save my life. Can't do that. She obstructed justice. How? By being a nurse? By doing her job? By hiding you from the law? I wasn't hiding, Jasper said. I was dying. There's a difference. Wilkes considered this. Then, slowly, he nodded. Fine. You come quietly. I'll drop any charges against Miss Caldwell. No, Eleanor said. No, that's not. But Jasper was already holding out his wrists for the irons. It's okay, he said again, meeting her eyes. This is how it has to be. It doesn't. We can fight this. We can… Eleanor, his voice was gentle. Let me do this. The irons clicked shut around his wrists. Eleanor felt something break inside her chest, something she'd only just started to repair. But Jasper smiled, small and sad, but real. Thank you, he said, for everything. Then Wilkes was leading him away, down the street toward the jail, and Eleanor was standing alone in the middle of town with everyone staring and no idea what to do next. She'd saved his life, and now she was going to lose him anyway. The unfairness of it hit her like a physical blow, but Eleanor Caldwell had spent her whole life being hit by unfair things, and she was done taking it lying down. Eleanor stood in the street long after they took him away, watching the door of the jail like if she stared hard enough she could will it to open again. The crowd dispersed slowly, people drifting back to their lives, conversations starting up again. A few looked at her with something that might have been pity. Most just looked uncomfortable, like they'd witnessed something they'd rather forget. Mrs. Hendricks walked past without making eye contact. Samuel Trotter made sure Eleanor saw him spit on the ground near her feet. Doc Pruitt appeared in the doorway of the clinic, his expression unreadable. You should come inside, Eleanor. I'm fine out here. You're making a scene. Good. Maybe people should be uncomfortable. Pruitt sighed, the sound heavy with something Eleanor couldn't quite identify. Come inside, we need to talk. Eleanor followed him into the clinic, her medical bag still weighing down her shoulder. The familiar smell hit her, carbolic acid and blood and the stale coffee Pruitt always had going. It should have felt like coming home. It felt like walking into a cage. Pruitt gestured to a chair. Eleanor didn't sit. You've put me in a difficult position, he said finally. I saved a man's life. That's what you hired me to do. I hired you to assist me with patients in town, not to ride off into blizzards on personal crusades. It wasn't personal. A man was dying. A man who's now in jail for murder. A man you apparently risked everything to protect. Pruitt leaned against his desk. The town council is calling for your dismissal. Eleanor had expected this. Still, hearing it out loud felt like a punch to the gut. On what grounds? Moral turpitude, conduct unbecoming. Take your pick. Half the town thinks you're sleeping with Jasper Kane. The other half thinks you've lost your mind. And what do you think? Pruitt was quiet for a long moment. I think you're the best nurse I've ever worked with. I think you care about your patients more than anyone I've ever met. And I think you just threw away your entire career for a man you barely know. I know him well enough. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you got caught up in something you didn't understand. Went up that mountain to prove something and came back with feelings you're confusing for… He stopped himself. For what? Eleanor's voice was sharp. Say it. For love. The word hung between them. You don't think I know the difference? Eleanor asked. I think you've been starving for basic human kindness for so long that the first person who showed you any made you forget yourself. Eleanor's hands clenched into fists. That's not what happened. Then what did happen? She wanted to tell him. Wanted to explain about the cabin, the fever, the nights when Jasper looked at her like she was something precious instead of something broken. Wanted to make him understand that this wasn't desperation or delusion or whatever condescending explanation he was offering. But the words wouldn't come, because maybe a small part of her wondered if Pruitt was right. It doesn't matter what happened, she said instead. Jasper's in jail, and I'm going to get him out. How? You have no money for a lawyer, no connections, no leverage. I have the truth. Pruitt laughed, bitter and sad. The truth doesn't matter, Eleanor. Not here. Not for people like you and Jasper Kane. The town's already decided what they want to believe. Then I'll change their minds. You can't. Watch me. She turned to leave. Pruitt's voice stopped her at the door. If you do this, if you keep fighting for him, you'll lose everything. Your position here, your reputation, any chance of working in medicine again. Is he really worth that? Eleanor looked back. Yes, he is. The jail was a small stone building at the end of Main Street, windows barred, door heavy and iron reinforced. Eleanor had never been inside before, never had reason to. She pushed through the door without knocking. Wilkes was at his desk, feet up, reading a newspaper. He looked up when she entered, expression souring immediately. "No visitors," he said. I'm not visiting. I'm here to talk about dropping the charges." "Not happening." "You don't have evidence. You said so yourself. This is about Silver Ridge, not the trappers." "So?" "So Silver Ridge happened 8 years ago. And from what Jasper told me, the man he killed was guilty. Admitted it, even. Doesn't matter. Vigilante justice is still murder." "Is it? Or is it a man taking action when the law failed him?" Wilkes set down his paper. "Miss Caldwell, I don't know what you think you're doing here, but I'm doing my job, which is protecting my patient. Jasper Kane is still recovering from life-threatening injuries. Keeping him locked up in a cold cell could kill him. That's his problem. Actually, it's yours. If he dies in your custody, that's on you." Wilkes's eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm warning you, as a medical professional. If Jasper Kane dies because you denied him proper care, I will make sure everyone knows it. I'll write to every newspaper within 100 miles. I'll testify at any inquest. I'll make your life a living hell. You're in no position to make threats. Neither are you." Eleanor leaned forward, hands flat on his desk. "You want to charge him with murder in Silver Ridge? Fine. But you'll need to extradite him. And that takes time, paperwork, communication with authorities there, weeks, maybe months. And in the meantime, you're responsible for his health and safety." "He'll be fine." "Will he?" "Because I can tell you exactly what happens when wounds like his don't receive proper follow-up care. Infection can return, sepsis can set in. He could be dead in 3 days, and you'd never see it coming." Wilkes shifted in his chair, uncomfortable. "What do you want?" "I want access. Daily visits to monitor his condition and change his bandages." "No." "Then you're responsible for whatever happens." They stared at each other across the desk. Finally, Wilkes said, 15 minutes. Once a day. And I'll be watching." "Fine." He stood, grabbed a keyring from the wall, and led her through a door into the back. The cell was exactly what Eleanor expected. Small, cold, a cot with a thin blanket, bars separating it from the rest of the building. Jasper sat on the cot, forearms resting on his knees, head down. He looked up when he heard footsteps. His expression shifted when he saw Eleanor. Something between relief and pain. 15 minutes, Wilkes said, unlocking the cell door. "And I'll be right outside." Eleanor stepped inside. The door clanged shut behind her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jasper said, "You shouldn't be here." "Probably not, but here I am anyway." Eleanor set her medical bag down, started unpacking supplies. "Take off your shirt. I need to check the wounds." "Eleanor, shirt off now." Jasper sighed but obeyed, wincing as he pulled the fabric over his head. The bandages were clean. He'd been careful, at least. But when Eleanor peeled them back, she could see the edges of the wounds were inflamed again. Not infected, not yet, but heading that direction. "You need to keep these cleaner," she said, cleaning the area with carbolic acid. "And you need rest. Real rest. Kind of hard to rest in a jail cell." "I know." She worked methodically, rebandaging the wounds with fresh cloth. "I'm going to get you out of here." "How?" "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." Jasper caught her wrist gently. "Don't." Eleanor looked at him. "Don't what?" "Don't throw your life away for me. Pruitt's going to fire you. The town already hates you. If you keep pushing, they'll run you out completely. Let them." "Eleanor, no. Listen to me." She took his face in her hands, forced him to meet her eyes. "I spent my entire life letting people tell me what I was worth, letting them decide where I belonged, what I deserved. I'm done with that. If they want to run me out of town, fine, but it's going to be on my terms, not theirs." "And then what? Where will you go?" "I don't know. Maybe I'll come to that cabin you mentioned. Maybe I'll go somewhere else entirely. But wherever I go, it's going to be because I chose it, not because someone made me." Jasper's expression cracked. You're the stubbornest person I've ever met. Takes one to know one. He pulled her down, kissed her hard and desperate through the bars of the cell. When they broke apart, Eleanor was smiling despite the tears on her face. I'm not giving up on you, she said, so get used to it. I'm already used to it, Jasper said. That's the problem. Outside, Wilkes knocked on the door. Time's up. Eleanor gathered her supplies, shouldered her bag. At the cell door, she looked back. I'll be back tomorrow. I'll be here, Jasper said. Not like I have much choice. Eleanor left the jail with a plan forming in her mind. Not a good plan, maybe, but a plan nonetheless. She went to the church, not to pray. She'd never been much for prayer, and these days she wasn't sure there was anyone listening anyway. But because the church was where the town council met, and she knew they were meeting tonight to discuss her dismissal. The minister, Reverend Hatch, looked surprised when she walked in. Miss Caldwell, can I help you? I want to speak at the council meeting tonight. I don't think that's appropriate. I think it's extremely appropriate. You're discussing my employment. I deserve the right to defend myself. Hatch hesitated. The council has already made up their minds. Then what's the harm in letting me speak? Another pause. Then, reluctantly, fine, but you'll have 5 minutes, no more. I'll take it. The meeting started at 7. Eleanor showed up at 6:45 and took a seat in the back row. The council consisted of 5 men: Hatch, Harris from the general store, the mayor, the owner of the saloon, and a rancher named Mackenzie who ran cattle in the foothills. All of them looked uncomfortable when Eleanor walked in. They went through regular business first: approvals for new construction, discussions about road maintenance, arguments about water rights. Eleanor sat through it all, hands folded in her lap, waiting. Finally, Hatch said, "Last item, the matter of Miss Eleanor Caldwell's employment at the clinic." Harris cleared his throat. "Motion to terminate immediately on grounds of moral turpitude and conduct unbecoming." "Second," the mayor said. "Any discussion?" Hatch asked. Eleanor stood. "I'd like to speak." The council exchanged looks. 5 minutes, Hatch said. "Starting now." Eleanor walked to the front of the room, faced them all. "You want to fire me," she said. "Fine. You have that right. But before you do, I want you to understand exactly what you're firing me for." She had their attention now. "I'm being dismissed because I saved a man's life. Because when everyone else in this town said he wasn't worth saving, I rode into a blizzard and brought him back from the edge of death. That's my crime. That's what you've decided is immoral and unbecoming. You helped a murderer," Harris started. "I helped a patient, a human being who was dying. That's my job. That's what you hired me to do. Or does my oath as a healer only apply to people you approve of?" Silence. "Jasper Kane killed a man 8 years ago," Eleanor continued. "Yes, that's true. But that man murdered his wife and 6-year-old daughter and was going to get away with it. And when Jasper went to the law, when he begged them to do something, they told him there wasn't enough evidence. So he took matters into his own hands. And you know what? I don't blame him. The law," the mayor began. "The law failed him, just like it fails people every day. Just like it failed me when I was blacklisted back east for doing my job too well. Just like it's failing Jasper now because it's easier to punish him than to admit the system is broken." Eleanor's voice rose. "You want to fire me for having morals? For caring about people the rest of you have written off? Then do it. But own what you're doing. Don't hide behind words like turpitude and conduct. Say what you really mean. Say you're firing me because I'm fat and difficult and I made you uncomfortable." "Miss Caldwell," Hatch tried to interrupt. "Say it," Eleanor demanded. "Say I'm being dismissed because I don't fit your idea of what a woman should be, because I'm too big, too loud, too unwilling to stay in my place, because I dared to think I had the same right as anyone else to make my own choices." Her voice cracked, but she pushed through it. "I have spent my entire life being told I'm not good enough, not thin enough, not pretty enough, not quiet enough. And I'm done. I'm done letting people like you decide my worth. So yes, fire me. Run me out of town. Do whatever you need to do to make yourselves feel better. But know this, I will walk out of here with my head held high, because I know what I did was right, and nothing you say or do will ever change that." She stopped, breathing hard, hands shaking. The room was dead silent. Then Mackenzie, the rancher, spoke up. "I got a question." Eleanor looked at him. This Jasper Kane, you love him? The question caught her off guard. What? Simple question. You love him? Eleanor's throat tightened. Yes, I do. And you think he's a good man? Yes? Despite what he did? Because of what he did. Because he loved his family enough to get justice for them when no one else would. Mackenzie nodded slowly. I had a daughter once, lost her to cholera when she was 7. If someone had killed her deliberately. He stopped, jaw working. Can't say I wouldn't have done the same thing Kane did. Harris made a disgusted sound. That's not the point. Then what is the point? Mackenzie cut him off. We're here to judge this woman for saving a life, for doing her job. And the only reason we're doing it is because we're uncomfortable that she did it better than any of us would have. She's made a mockery of this town, the mayor said. No. We made a mockery of ourselves when we let her ride into that blizzard hoping she'd die. Mackenzie stood. I vote to keep her employed, and I vote to drop all charges against Jasper Kane. You can't do that, Wilkes said from the back of the room where he'd been standing. This is a town council meeting, not a trial. No, but the council can make a recommendation to you as sheriff, and I'm recommending you let that man go. On what grounds? On the grounds that holding him is a waste of resources and time. On the grounds that he hasn't committed any crimes in this territory. And on the grounds that if you don't, I'll personally fund his legal defense and make sure every newspaper in the territory knows you're holding an innocent man for crimes you can't prove. Wilkes's face darkened. Are you threatening me? I'm telling you how it's going to be. The room erupted in arguments. The council members talked over each other, Wilkes shouting to be heard, Hatch trying to restore order. Eleanor stood in the middle of it all, hardly daring to believe what was happening. Finally, Hatch banged his gavel hard enough to crack the wood. Enough! We'll take a vote. All in favor of retaining Miss Caldwell's employment? Mackenzie's hand went up immediately. Then slowly the saloon owner raised his. 3-2. It was enough. Motion carries, Hatch said, sounding tired. Miss Caldwell, you may return to work. Eleanor couldn't speak, could only nod. As for the matter of Jasper Kane, Hatch continued, we'll recommend Sheriff Wilkes release him pending further investigation into the trapper's disappearances. If evidence comes to light connecting him to those deaths, we'll revisit. Otherwise, he's free to go. Wilkes looked like he'd swallowed something rotten. Fine. But he's leaving town. I don't want him here. Agreed, Hatch said. Mr. Kane will depart Copper Falls within 24 hours of release. Eleanor found her voice. And if he chooses to stay in the territory? At his cabin? Then he stays at his own risk, but he doesn't come into town, understood? Understood. The meeting adjourned. People filed out, most of them not looking at Eleanor. But Mackenzie stopped beside her on his way out. My wife died 3 years back, he said quietly. Fever that turned to pneumonia. Doc Pruitt said there was nothing to be done. But I remember you came anyway. Sat with her for 2 days straight, trying everything you could think of. She still died. But you tried. And I never forgot that. Eleanor's eyes burned. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just keep doing what you're doing. World needs more people like you. He left. Eleanor stood alone in the empty church, letting the reality of what just happened sink in. She'd won. Not completely. Not perfectly. But enough. She'd kept her job. And Jasper was going to be free. For the first time in weeks, Eleanor let herself cry. Not from sadness or fear, but from sheer overwhelming relief. She'd fought, and she'd won. Jasper was released the next morning. Eleanor was there when Wilkes opened the cell, when he handed Jasper his belongings and told him in no uncertain terms that he had until tomorrow to be gone. They walked out of the jail together, into morning sunlight that felt like absolution. I can't believe that worked, Jasper said. Mackenzie came through. I didn't even know he... Eleanor stopped. I need to thank him. Later. Right now I just want to get out of this town. They walked to the edge of Copper Falls to where the trail started up into the mountains. Neither of them spoke until the buildings were behind them and trees surrounded them on all sides. Then Jasper stopped, turned to face her. Come with me, he said. Eleanor had been expecting this. Had been thinking about it all night. I can't. Not yet. Why not? Because I just fought to keep my job. Because there are people here who need me. Because she took his hands. Because if I leave now, it proves them right. Proves I was just running away. And if you stay, then I prove I belong here. That I have value. That I'm not just someone who hides in the mountains. Jasper's jaw tightened. So this is it? We just say goodbye? No. This is me asking you to wait. Eleanor stepped closer. Give me 6 months. Let me show this town. Let me show myself that I can do this. That I can be a real healer here, not just someone they tolerate. And then what? Then I'll come to you, if you still want me. Jasper laughed, the sound rough. If I still want you? Eleanor, I'll want you until the day I die. Then 6 months, that's all I'm asking. He pulled her into his arms, held her like he was trying to memorize the feel of her. 6 months, he agreed. But I'm coming down once a week to make sure you're okay. Wilkes said, I don't care what Wilkes said. I'm not leaving you alone down here with people who hate you. I can take care of myself. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to. Eleanor pulled back enough to look at him. We're really doing this. Yeah, we are. It's crazy. Completely. It might not work. Probably won't. Eleanor smiled despite the tears on her face. But we're trying anyway. Because that's what we do, Jasper said. We try. Even when it's impossible. Especially when it's impossible. He kissed her one more time, long and slow and full of promise. Then he started up the trail back toward the cabin, back toward the life he'd built in isolation. But this time, Eleanor knew he wasn't alone, and neither was she. 6 months later, Eleanor walked into Doc Pruitt's office and set a letter on his desk. What's this? He asked. My resignation. Effective in 2 weeks. Pruitt looked at the letter, then at her. You're really going through with it? I am. The cabin in the mountains, with Jasper Kane. Yes. You'll be isolated, cut off. You'll give up everything you've built here. Eleanor smiled. I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing something better. Better than medicine. Better than spending my life trying to prove myself to people who will never see my worth. She sat down across from him. These past 6 months, I've saved 17 lives, delivered 4 babies, set 3 broken bones, and treated more infections than I can count. And you know what? The town still treats me like I'm disposable. Like I should be grateful they let me work here at all. Not everyone, enough of them. And I'm tired, Doc. I'm tired of fighting for basic human respect. I'm tired of being the joke. I'm tired of being alone. Pruitt was quiet for a moment. You won't be alone up there? No, I'll have Jasper, and I'll still practice medicine. There are trappers, hunters, prospectors all through those mountains. People who need help just as much as anyone in town. Maybe more, because they have no one else. And that's enough for you? Eleanor thought about the past 6 months, about Jasper writing down every week like clockwork, bringing supplies, staying for a few hours before heading back up, about the letters they'd written, the plans they'd made, the future they were building together, about the way he looked at her, not like she was too much, but like she was exactly enough. Yes, she said, it's more than enough. Pruitt signed the letter. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. She stood, extended her hand. Thank you for giving me a chance when no one else would. Pruitt shook her hand. You were the best nurse I ever had. Don't forget that. I won't. Eleanor walked out of the clinic for the last time, into the spring sunshine, into a future that was uncertain and terrifying and hers. Jasper was waiting at the edge of town with 2 horses. Ready? He asked. Eleanor swung up into the saddle, settled her medical bag across her shoulders. Ready. They rode up into the mountains together, leaving Copper Falls behind. The cabin was exactly as Eleanor remembered it. Small, rough, isolated. But when they walked through the door, it didn't feel like a prison. It felt like home. That first night they sat by the fire, Eleanor's head on Jasper's shoulder, his arm around her waist. You think we're crazy? She asked. Absolutely. You think it'll work? I think we'll make it work, because we're both too stubborn to do anything else. Eleanor smiled. Fair point. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Inside, the fire crackled, and two people who'd spent most of their lives being told they didn't belong anywhere finally found a place where they fit. Not because it was easy, not because the world had changed, but because they'd chosen each other. And sometimes, that was enough. Eleanor Caldwell learned something in that cabin that she'd spent her whole life trying to understand. Worth wasn't something other people gave you. It was something you claimed for yourself. She'd ridden into a blizzard because a stranger needed help. She'd fought a town's prejudice because it was right. She'd chosen love over safety because some things were worth the risk. And in the end, she'd built a life that was hers, messy and imperfect and real. She helped people in those mountains, trappers with broken bones, prospectors with infected wounds, families with sick children who had nowhere else to turn. She became known, not as the fat nurse from Copper Falls, but as the healer in the high country. The woman who would ride through any storm to save a life. And Jasper learned to live again. Not just survive, but live. He laughed. He built things. He carved toys for the children Eleanor delivered and furniture for the cabin they shared. They fought sometimes. Over stupid things, important things, everything in between, because neither of them was easy and love was never simple. But they stayed. Through harsh winters and scorching summers, through doubt and fear and moments when it all seemed impossible, they stayed. Because some people are meant to find each other. Not because they're perfect, but because they're willing to fight for something real. And Eleanor Caldwell, who'd been mocked and dismissed and treated like she wasn't enough for most of her life, finally understood that she'd always been enough. She just needed to find someone who could see it. Years later, when travelers asked about the healer in the mountains, they'd hear stories. About the woman who'd ridden into a blizzard. About the man she'd saved. About the love they'd built in the wilderness. Some people said it was romantic. Others said it was foolish. Eleanor didn't care what they said. She'd learned long ago that other people's opinions didn't define her. Only her choices did. And she'd chosen well.